It's pretty obvious a lot of things are costing us more money recently, which is never fun to talk about, but for artists especially, it's starting to feel like our work costs us more time. Take just one example. A move to the promotion of more video-based content has made artists on places like Instagram feel pressure to make full-on video content, showcasing the creation of their work instead of just posting a picture of the final product. Speaking from experience, that's a big difference in time. After recently feeling the pressure of falling further and further behind and getting the well-meaning comments like, "Do you still make videos?" I sat down and did the math and realized just for recurring things that I need to do every month without factoring in additional work, responsibilities, sick or mental health days, potential trips or vacations, I have about 34 days of work to do every month. If I did everything perfectly, and trust me, dear viewer, I have not been doing things perfectly. Once you take out weekends, which I've tried to reclaim from my work to have a somewhat healthy balance, that's 9 days a month that I'm falling behind, minimum, every month. And personally, with ADHD, that's a recipe for disaster. But without making a video that just vents and generates anxiety though, I want to show you the way that I'm meeting this challenge head on, and hopefully give you some tools to set realistic, proactive markers in front of your learning, projects, or passions, and, if it applies to you, the realization that you need to up your rates or increase the value that you put on your time. It's pretty easy for life to just happen to us if we aren't paying attention. There's digital distractions, there's people asking of our time, and if we simply reacted, there may be nothing of us left by the time we finally got around to having agency over ourselves. So obviously it's a good idea to feel in control and have a good heading. I talked in a video last year called "This is how you're going to hit your goals," mainly about building consistency into your days and weeks so that creativity gets the chance to build itself like a muscle that we can access less randomly or spontaneously. I just hit a year of bullet journaling, not the pretty looking kind some people do, but mainly just to organize and track how I spend my days, weeks, and months. A nice way to get a certain amount of clarity. The problem I've run into a lot, other than the 34 days of work thing, is that there are so many different things and kinds of tasks to do that I get a sort of choice paralysis of everything being important and urgent to focus on until nothing is. And losing 9 days a month and the feeling of losing 9 days a month is a little like being in a life raft that's getting further and further from these islands of things like improvement, rest, financial success, friends and family, or literally anything else. So you start paddling furiously in every direction, which, along with the current of time pulling you out, means you're just getting nowhere and exhausting yourself. And then, try as you might, something snaps mentally and you open up Minecraft for what feels like a week straight, during which time you continue to feel guilty that you aren't moving. That feeling, by the way, is called burnout, and it happens almost constantly to me if I'm not careful. It's just the mathematical result of overextending myself for too long. If it sounds like I'm complaining, I'm absolutely not. I want to get all of this done. But if conveying information in a matter-of-fact way comes off as negative, that should say something about the information. Now, the answer for the longest time has always just been,
I have a great idea.
I'll just work harder. And I see some of you already commented that down below. You just gotta hustle and grind set a bit more, man. Crunch it out until your tasks lay slain at your feet victorious. The problem with that is I've kind of been doing that for almost 10 years. And rather than it making things better, although it has had its place a few times down the line, you know how in, like, let's just take a random example, like in say Minecraft, when you go to repair something, it costs more and more experience points every time you repair it, until eventually the cost of repair is so prohibitively high, it's essentially unfixable. Each time I've crunched out work like that, wringing out every drop of productivity is like one of those repairs, and as I keep doing it and getting older, the longer the recovery required, and the more dangerous it becomes. It's kind of funny, I'll look online at the rest of the industry and think, yeah, these artists need to be getting paid more, they need to be given 4-day work weeks, they should have benefits, they need to start getting valued for their time and expertise, and then I'll turn around and grind my bones into dust to get 5% more productivity out of a week. All while being my own boss. I have found myself with an overbearing boss. I'm probably committing OSHA violations. The diminishing returns, the lack of progress, the exhaustion, all compound to make a not great headspace. So the question becomes, why do that to yourself? So obviously, again, I don't explain any of this to get your sympathy. I want this work to be sustainable, and I found the solution. I just made burgers. Thanks for watching, and have fun creating. probably wasn't clear. You'll want to adapt this loosely to your own circumstances. You might be a freelancer like me, you might have a day job, you might still be in school, you might be a caretaker, you might be living with substantial physical limitations. But the one thing that we all have, though, is something I'm going to distort a Miyazaki quote for. So remember when he said, "Every day I feel it, the limit of my abilities." I'm going to need you to change that up and repeat after me. Every day I feel it, the limit of my limitations. Because no matter how big we dream, or let a story idea balloon, or a project to get scope creep, or the amount of things that we start juggling, all of us have a finite amount of time and energy every day and every year. It might be the hour or two that you get before work. It could be the 90 minutes you have after you put the kids down to sleep. Or it could be your entire work week. The thing is that all of those things have boundaries. So the solution is that you need to make burgers, which I'm realizing still doesn't mean anything to you, and that's honestly my bad. Things like our example of video content being promoted over still images might be out of your control when it comes to time inflation, but other things are. Usually, something only grows to the container that we put it in. Think of blowing up a balloon in a cardboard box, or a goldfish only getting big relative to its environment. That means we can stave off the inflation. The point here is to start with a small list of things that you need to get done. For me, it's the things that I need to get done every month, and then a few extra days devoted to one special project, which right now is my pilot Stormfellers. Now, my initial reaction to this is panic. That's not enough days. I need to be spending at least 2 weeks a month on Stormfellers. But because of reality, including bills, time, and energy, starting with this takes a ton of pressure off and actually makes sure that at least that amount of days will go towards it. And side note for anyone else worried, in this circumstance, because I've hired an animator who's helping out, more work than just mine is going towards the completion of Stormfellers, and at the same time, I have to make enough to pay him in the same cycle. It's a unique circumstance. So as excited as we all are to get everything done as soon as possible, if you start split with 2 projects or learning endeavors, or 3, that means you're taking the time that could go towards one thing and splitting it into thirds. That means it will take at least 3 times longer for all of them to get done. On the same hand, doing things one at a time becomes the fastest way to all of them getting done. Here is my next problem, because for most people, there isn't just one kind of task that you're dealing with. Maybe you do one operation on an assembly line for 8 hours straight every day, but for most people, it's almost the opposite. For me, for example, my work could involve drawing, painting, 3D work, teaching, writing, filming, or editing. Previously, I had blocked out things like 45 or 90-minute chunks to work on one kind of thing and then another kind of thing. So you'd make a little progress on lots of things each day. The problem was that task switching was counterintuitive. You're all warmed up for drawing, and you change your brain over to editing or animating. So this is the first part of our burger. Instead of every day having several tiny slices of different meats, there is one big meat for each day. One overall task that, if completed, will mean that the day was a success. It doesn't mean that this task should or will take all day, or all the time you have allotted. Rather, that the day was good if it got done. For me, it broke down like this. 6 days a month go toward the illustration I do for the trading card on Biko's backpack. This is a good time estimate that doesn't really hem me into too tight of a schedule. The whole point of this plan is to overestimate my time. If it gets done faster, that's even better, but there's no pressure to do so. 2 days a month go toward designing the pin for Biko's backpack and for creating some of that short-form video content like reels or shorts. Then 6 days, 3 and 3, will go towards making 2 videos a month. That breaks down to 1 day of writing with a thumbnail and title also, 1 day of shooting, and 1 day of editing. Will it take me all day to shoot? Obviously not. I'll probably get a head start on the edit on day 2, for example. And that's kind of the whole point. Overestimate the amount of time something will take. I have some recurring work that I do every Friday, and also have some recurring work that if I don't get to, it's hard to make time for, and that's critiques and commissions from over on Patreon. So obviously, I can be flexible, but I figured out that 3 hours every Friday devoted to that will put a much better dent in the backlog, and soon I'll likely be caught up and be in a healthy maintenance mode. 1 more day set aside for extra client work that I'll probably be doing as our next ingredient on other days as well, which leaves us with 3 days a month specifically devoted to our special project, in my case, Stormfellers. Now at first it feels really limiting, but really it's making these things possible in the first place to do this. Not to mention I'll likely make progress on it at other times as well. The next thing I did was formulate all of these days into a repeating cycle. Now, every Sunday night, I know exactly what I'm doing this week. With some small modifications, there's a way that week 1 looks, a way that week 2 and 3 and 4 look. The kinds of tasks, like I was saying, are grouped together, and hopefully with repetition, it will be easier to gear up for what kind of week comes next. That means rowing to each island one by one instead of trying to be on all of them at once. What this also means for you is that even without knowing exactly what you're doing at all times, it might be the difference between saying yes to a new commission or realizing that given how limited your time is, the only way it would make sense to do it would be to up your rates. The more laid out things are and the less nebulous, and the sooner you'll be caught up and not behind. As much as that time inflation continues to plague us, quantifying it like this is the best weapon against it. In a strange way, by giving things more time, you're getting rid of the pressure of the balloon hitting against the side of the box. Bigger box, less crunch and pressure. Kind of like how if you know something is exactly 10 minutes away, you could leave with 9 minutes to spare and be stressed the whole time, or you could leave with 15 minutes, 5 minutes early, and have a significantly more pleasant experience. Obviously, if you give yourself too little an amount of time, you're stressed and there's no room for error. And on the other side of the spectrum, if you give yourself too much, there is actually the possibility that you'll just procrastinate and leave everything till the end, which again will leave you stressed with no room for error. The idea is this perfectly reasonable, medium-sized block that allows for room for error, allows for a little bit of extra time that you weren't accounting for, but still fits in that comfortable box. Time for our next part of the burger. There are always things that come up. They could be client work, meetings, emergencies, errands. These are our toppings. They're the things that go on the burger, but they don't overpower the meat that's already on them. The most important thing is already done. The rest of the day, however much of it is left, is meeting with those things that may be urgent but not necessarily important. Without as much time blindness, you can now evaluate if there's any room left on the burger for something like a last-minute request, something extra, or even sometimes a little time goofing off in the afternoon, like you might have at a real job. One more ingredient. Lunchtime, walks, checking email and social media, that's our condiments, a little bit of ketchup or barbecue sauce or something. A little goes a long way, and it makes the rest of the burger more palatable.
Can I make a Krabby Patty now?
Finally, we sandwich our burger between two buns, and for me, those two buns' names are 9 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. Whatever your circumstances are, having a set start and end point, a routine or warm-up and cool-down ritual is going to make this feel repeatable. And if your days are like mine, it's going to be necessary to put a cap on that time so that you can do things like see the sun, go to the gym, spend time with your spouse. That makes the next day have more motivation and joy. I've got my schedule laid out like this until the end of July, and I'd love to share the results of this experiment. For you, figure out the meats you want to thematically build from. Is it learning perspective or anatomy? Is it making a certain amount of progress on your webcomic? Is it getting a little more done on your next bit of indie animation? For the things that come up, make room for them as toppings, but don't let them overtake the whole burger. Once you do this, you'll have the amount of clarity you need to start tackling things on your list. You'll be assigning yourself things in the future and being a better boss to yourself. And if the end results end up being better without any crunch, baby, you got a burger going. Now all you need is a better way to be creative on command, and for that, you'll want to watch this video next. Check the description for Biko's backpack, my course, and my socials on other platforms at Bagel Denizen. Thanks for watching, and have fun creating.